Hey gang, it's me, it's Shannon, Sheepless Needles, vegan podcast, not about being vegan, where we do all sorts of fun stuff, where we talk about knitting, we talk about gaming, but in this particular series, 2023 Geogradient Mystery Knit Along with West Knits. This is episode 4, I think, and this is the wrap up. It's a wrap episode. Who knew? Who knew? Cheers, Atomic Pumpkin. I forget who makes it. Pumpkin ale with habanero. And you guys, if you've never had a habanero pumpkin moment, it's not Miller time. It's Atomic Pumpkin time. So let's talk about it. Let's do this. Let's end this MKAL series. Yeah, that's it. Done. See ya. No, okay, you guys. Let's get into this. Okay, so this is my third or fourth mystery knit along. Third? Mystery? I don't even know. Somewhere in between 3 and 4. Here's what I can tell you. Let's give you a broad scale overview. This is a very, very knittable pattern. There is nothing over technical in it. There is nothing that I read, saw, and went, oh shit. Like, got sweaty armpits, whole 9 yards. Didn't have any of that. So, for an MKAL for West Knits, this is probably one of the easiest that I can think of. So if you're new to MKALs, mystery knit alongs, or you're new to West Knits and you're intimidated by it, which you should not be, but if you are, I get it. I was once as well. This is the Geogradient is a really good pattern to get over that hump because there is nothing crazy in this. This is not shawlography. This is not, slipstravaganza. It's just not. It is a different pattern. And we can talk about that a little bit as well. But I do think it's beginner friendly. Here are the things that I think you might want to have in your arsenal just after I finish knitting. This is kind of where I stand on it. Because of the cast on, if you are like me, I would have some double pointed needles or some flexi flipicuses. These are Addy flexi flips. Let me see here. Oh, glare, sorry, but flexi flips. These are US 4s. I did knit on a US 4. I did this because way back when Clue 1, I cannot do Emily Ocker's fantastic cast on. Doesn't mean I haven't tried. Try. I tried and I failed, and it's okay to fail, and we'll talk about that in a second. But I just went ahead and cast on in the round on these. Clue 1, you're in the round. It's the only time you're in the round, so if that is a hurdle for you, it's over in a blink of an eye. Okay, so maybe not a blink of an eye, but like you get what I'm saying. It's not a long haul in the round. But this will assist you if you are like me and you do not like magic loop. I knit on those for as long as I could until I switched over to my cabled needle. So, have some extra needles. And I would also tell you, for some reason, because I am, again, this pattern is unlike some of the past patterns. You do not need this much cable, and this is a 60 inch. You're probably fine with a 40 inch. The only time you may want a 60 is at the very end for the cast off. Or Clue 4, basically. But even Clue 4 could go on a 40, and I think you'd be okay. I'm going to tell you, it's overkill for Clues 2 and 3, and you're not going to want to deal with it. So, here is what happened to me. I used flexi flips during Clue 1. I used these during Clue 1. I used, and I don't have them. Hold the line. This is my wonderful cup that I keep my straights in. Get it? Vegan. Okay, so anyway, I used these on clue 3. Yes, I did. I used straights. I have not used these. And I'm going to tell you, what year is it? It's 2023. Probably in 7 years. 7 or 8 years. So I pulled out my straights. So when I say you have a couple needles in your arsenal, I'm not joking. It will help you. You are not going to want to deal with the cable on clue 3. I guarantee it. If you do, you're a masochist. And you're probably right up my alley, because that's what I started with. So tip 1, have a couple options in the right needle size for you. All of mine, I gauged US 4 fine. So tip number 2, do the gauge swatch. Not only do the gauge swatch in the beginning of the project before you start knitting, but clue 4 is a different technique. It is not difficult. And he suggested, watch my little video and do the gauge swatch if you've never done this before. And I think it was a good idea. And let me show you. Well, I'll show that to you in a second, but let me grab it because it's somewhere. Oh, no, it's right behind me. I'm just trying to get up and show you my ass, apparently, because I've been doing squats, y'all. Squats like there's no tomorrow. Cheers to squats. So, in your arsenal, definitely have a couple options for needles, just in the same size. I don't think you need to size out on that. Stitch markers, for sure. And what else can I tell you? And a good attitude, as normal. Be open-minded. You wouldn't be knitting this if you weren't. And whoa, do you see those floaties flying everywhere from the dust that I kicked up when I went to my bookshelf for that? Sorry about that. It's not snowing. That would be cat hair. Okay, so those are kind of the things I think you'll need. I didn't use a ruler or a tape measure in this project at all, so you don't need that. Oh, you know what would be really helpful? If I had smaller scissors. I have fabric scissors, and they're huge. If you can get little yarn snips, your life will be much better in this knit along, because to say that there's minor amounts of color changing in this, understatement. There are so many changes of color in this on repeat, and there are so many ends, tapestry needle, that you need to weave in. So many. So where you can do the weave in, Stephen, highly recommend. Highly, highly, highly recommend. Now, let me just say this with the West Knits knit-alongs. It is not a Stephen West shawl without a bang-in bind-off, meaning like half your time in the project is spent on the cast-off. Don't look at me and say, you're exaggerating, Shannon. I'm not. And you all know it. 50% of the project is the last clue, and it's the bind-off. And sometimes the bind-off could be striping. Sometimes the bind-off's like a gazillion length I-cord that could wrap around the globe. This is no different. Clue 4 is your longest stretch of stitches. So yeah, tapestry needle, weave in as you go where you can, and let's just get into it. Let's break it down, okay? Hang on. If I'm breaking down, I'm drinking a little. You know what I'm saying. Now, before I get into all the clues, I do want to say something really quickly. It took me a while to film the wrap up of this. I had done a dry run earlier because I hadn't been filming in so long and I didn't know if the sound was working, all of that good stuff. And then I filmed for about 20 minutes and I just am not like, I couldn't figure out why am I having a hurdle with this? And it's because this project is a little bit of a hurdle for me, and I think it's coming out when I'm trying to explain myself. So, disclaimer, anything that I say, well, and this goes for everything that I do, it's just me. It's just my opinion. You can agree and not agree. It doesn't matter to me. I mean, it matters to me, but it doesn't matter to me. I don't represent all knitters. I don't represent all vegans. I'm just me. I'm just Shannon. I'm representing the island of Shannon. You know what I'm saying? I'm with the Misfit Toys. I'm with the habanero and pumpkin. I'm just over here hanging out. So join me. Okay, so kind of what I want to do is really quickly just go over the clues and then we can break it down a little bit. But I am cold and I have a sweatshirt. I'm sitting on it. Okay. one sleeve. I feel like I'm Mr. Rogers right now. What the fuck? Okay. You guys. Clue one. Listen, I'm not going to get, sorry, there we go. Okay. I'm not going to get into the drama of clue one. And I really don't think it should have been drama. And let me say this. I am really, really touched and proud to be in the knitting community that I am in, because every single one of you who tagged me, who messaged me, or who commented on a video to me about Clue One all got it. They all understood the pivot. There wasn't an issue, and move on. Like, the only drama that was happening was coming from a part of the community that is so anti-community and so anti-inclusivity and so anti-everything. And we let that drama become the conversation. And quite frankly, while I think that people certainly have an opinion and have platforms to voice them, I don't need to give them more space than that. And I think, unfortunately, they were given space that I'm not necessarily sure that they had earned. And I'm going to leave it at that. So if you were one of those people, I hope you understand a little bit more now today why that pivot was so important to go with what he wanted for this pattern, and he being Stephen West, and we are speaking about Clue One. Just in full honesty, I knit Clue One 3 different ways. So this is my third and final. Whoop, am I upside down? I am. Sorry, guys. So this is the actual recommended Clue One that will now be printed in the pattern forevermore. So that is what I went with, but it was my third Clue One. So number one, I felt like, wow, my eyes are huge. Sorry. I felt like Clue One took 80 years and a day to knit, but it really didn't. The reason why it felt that way is I had had the 2 false starts and then I got into it. It's not a lot of knitting, you guys. This is light knitting for a West Knits MKAL, in my opinion. Sound off below if you feel differently or if you agree, but I really think it was only 4 colors, 400 grams. It wasn't a hell of a lot of knitting. It wasn't what I expected it to be. So there's that. So Clue One, my only tip is, and before I say this, someone had a beautiful comment. I think it was on one of the last 2 videos, I don't know which, saying how lucky I was to have a sister to knit with. And 100%, I count my lucky stars every day for the sister that I have. I love her dearly. I want to be an old spinster with her, with like sitting in a house on the beach with dogs knitting. Like, I'm good with that, right? I love her dearly, and she is a fabulous knitter. She picked up knitting far after I did, and she far excels in technique. I mean, she is a phenomenal natural knitter, and she blows me away. So yes, kind viewer, I am extraordinarily lucky. But you also brought up your daughter who didn't want to try knitting because she didn't want to fail. And I am someone who battles with that issue in life in general. Like, sometimes for a long time I wouldn't try things because I didn't want to look stupid. I didn't want to fall on my face. And then all of a sudden I realized I really didn't give a shit anymore. And it was sometime in my late teenage years that I figured that out, where it was like, I really don't give a fuck. Because what someone's opinion of me is, I can't control that. I can only control how I react to it. And if my reaction is to cower inside and not try things, I'm not going to get anywhere. And if you always try to fit in, you're never going to stand out, right? Like, you're never going to do anything that is going to be anything other than normal. And this is a big, beautiful world we live in. And every eccentricity, I can't say that word, sorry, and weirdness and oddness that's out there, I gravitate to 100%, because I don't like normal. Like, it's not that normal's a bad thing, but it's just not who I am. It's not what I gravitate to. It's not my jam, as they say. So if you're not going to try, you're never going to find out. And if you don't try, you're not going to succeed ever, because there's no success without trying and sometimes failing. Like, that's part of the process. And that's part of the process of knitting, is like, sometimes you have to frog, sometimes you have to tink, and that's okay. I will probably say that every project I cast on, my first cast on is not what's used in the project. I probably frog a cast on 1 to 5 times easily every time. If it's a hat, it doesn't even matter what it is. Maybe not a hat, but you get what I'm saying. Like, I always have a false start and then I'm good to go. And that false start to me isn't a failure. That's just my process. You know, you can't make cookies without putting ingredients in a bowl, right? Like you need to mix things up and then you go. So to me, those failures or what someone would see might feel like a failure, it's part of the process. Like it has to be there. So daughter, if you're listening, oh my God, don't worry about it. Failing is a beautiful thing because it means you're trying and you're in it, right? Like, don't sit on the sidelines. Come on in. We'll help you. I'll help you fail spectacularly. Don't even worry about it. So anyway, I don't even know what we were talking about. Clue 1. Okay, clue 1. All right, so the cast on for clue 1 was the Emily Ockers, whatever it is. Dude's not happening, which is why I sourced out my Flexi Flips and moved on about my business. But clue 1, I mean, literally, there's not much to say about it. It's like you're in the round. It's the only time you're in the round on the pattern and you're doing the square, right? So when you knit it, like originally you think you're going to go like that, but you don't. It ends up like this. A diamond instead of a square. Well, you know what I'm saying. Okay, so that would be clue 1. And then here's the thing. I started with A, right? And then B, C, D. After I finished the shawl, and this is why I want to put this in, if you haven't started yet, I really want you to think about your color order. Because if you follow the pattern as written, you are going to end up with more color C and color D left over than you will A and B. No, that's not true. I'm totally lying to you. And you want to know why I'm lying to you? Because I knit this. This was my original clue 1, and it used up more of my A and B than anything else. So ignore what I just said. Oh, look at all that dust. How do I want to say this? Okay. Color management becomes important because I wish I had started with D. D is my favorite color in my palette. I really wish I had done it in reverse. And that comes in at the end when we get to clue 4, and it'll make a little more sense. So ignore what I said. If you follow the pattern, I don't know where you're going to end up in your yardage, but I highly recommend that you do what he says. When you get to clue 4, weigh your yarn. And then you will know how many repeats you can do on clue 4 and what you need to have left over for if you're going to do fringe or, whatever you're going to do for your bind off. Absolutely do that weigh in, because that completely dictated how I ended my shawl. I had less A and B as a result of not frogging, but I didn't feel like ripping it apart. And I think it's part of the journey of this project. So there you have it. So clue 2, easy peasy. It's your eyelets. If you've never done yarn overs, you're going to love them. They're super easy, and you will never be intimidated by seeing weird yarn over instructions ever again. Yarn overs are like one of my favorite things. And when I first started knitting and I would see instructions like yarn over and, purl through the back loop, I was like, what the fuck? Like, that freaked me out. Now I'm like, whatever. You'll get the hang. It easy peasy. And look how great that looks. Like, those eyelets are phenomenal. So clue 2, really my only thing I'm going to tell you to be careful about, and this would be not only just for clue 2, but this is where it started. Make sure when you are doing your end or beginning stitches on each row, right side, wrong side, do not pull your stitches tight. Don't do it, because this I-cord is the edge. You're creating an I-cord in section 2. You may not know it, but you'll know it at the end of the project that it's the edge of your project. So you don't want to over tighten, particularly during clue 2. I did, and it's not as stretchy. It's not stretchy, and it should be stretchy. So if you're feeling tense, pull back, relax, do what you need to do. Have a gummy. I don't know. Have a beer. Just get that tension out of your hands and stop holding your knitting so tightly, Shannon. Clue 3, I had never done before, but very easy. So clue 3 are your wingtips. So they're mirror images. And I shall warn you, pain in the ass because, all right, so there's one. So mirror image on the other side. I did one, went to start the second one. I was like, holy smokes, snooze fest. I need this to be over. So I gunned through the last half of clue 3 because I was just done with it. And this is kind of what happens. This is something that I go through with West Knit projects. I will reach a point where I'm like so tired of doing something, and then finally it will change. And it's always a little bit longer than you want it to be. It's kind of like a pregnant pause where you're like, that's how the knitting is. Like you want it to be done, but you have another section. But once it's done, right? That's how I felt about clue 3. It does look like a polyester shirt. I talked about that in my chips episode, and that's okay. I'm in love with it. Only thing I'm going to tell you about clue 3 is your yarn management on the back of your work is going to be either an there's shit flying through there, will be really easy for you, or it will be problematic like it was for me. I was fine when I was down here because you can do the weave in Steven, and you can see it on the edge of my work, particularly in color A because it's on color D. This is the wrong side you're looking at. So these are my weave ins over here, right? When you start clue 3, it's the longest rows you're going to have, and then you work to the point. So you're working from a lot of stitches to very minor amount of stitches, which is the way I like it. Nobody likes to start with 3 stitches and you got to end with 1,000. It's much better to start with 1,000 and work your way down because it gets quicker as you go, right? Like I'm just saying, that's where I sit with that. So when you get towards the top here, there is not enough stitches in the row to actually weave in and have it be sound like, you know what I'm saying? There's just not enough stitches. I usually weave, I know people are like 7 stitches is fine. Bitches, I'm like 15 or more. Like I just am. So what I ended up doing, I did not weave in the stitches at the top here. I left them go until the very end of the project. And when I flipped the work over, I took my ends and wove them into clue 4 underneath the dip stitches. And that will make sense to you once you're knit row clue 4, and you flip over your work. You will see on the back side, this is the back side of the dip stitch. I tucked stitches in. So I wove them across and tucked them in wherever I could on a dip stitch. You do you. You may find it easier to weave these in a different way that I didn't think about. Like maybe you're weaving them into your I-cord. Whatever you feel safe and secure with, you do. But just keep an eye on it. Because once I was done, I was like, crap. I had finished knitting. I hadn't done the fringe yet, but I had finished the actual knitting of the project, and then I had to sit down and weave in. And those are the moments where I'm like, this is why I only do one Stephen West knit shawl a year. Because, guys, I don't care. The amount of weaving in, whether you do the weave in Stephen, the amount of like yarn management on the wrong side is enough to make me, I don't know, cry. No, there were no tears during this. It's just a lot. And I know it's going to happen every time. And I mentally prepare myself for that every time. But once I get to it, I'm like over it and I don't want to do it. And that's why it's problematic to wait until the end. because once you're done, you're fucking done, and you do not want to sit there and like weave in ends. Like you're just done. Like mentally, I'm done. And that's just the way it is for me with these projects. So that's my tip for clue 3. Clue 4, 100% 2 tips. Follow his instructions and knit the gauge swatch if you've never done the dip technique, which I love calling it that. So what I did is I grabbed where are you? I grabbed the cheapest yarn, like just yarn out of my stash. And this is all I did. I didn't even do the entire swatch, you guys. I literally did one run of it, and once I got it, I got it. So, oh my God, yarn everywhere. But as you can see, I had never done it before. I was like, let me just try and see if I understand what's going on. It's really, once you do it and you get it, you're good to go. But if you've never done it before, I would not try to start learning how to do it on your project, because clue 4 runs the entire border or span of the base of the shawl. So when you're holding it, clue 4 runs all the way across. It's a lot of stitches, and I just don't think you want to figure out you were doing something wrong halfway across a row, because that's like a lot of fucking stitches, right? So just do just do a small swatch. You don't need to do, he has like 30 rows in his swatch. I was like, fuck that. I'll just do 10. If I understand, I understand. If I don't, I'll keep going. It's really intuitive. It's not hard. This was really the only thing where I was like, okay, I need to stop and figure out how I'm doing this. But it was so easy, and it's really fun to do. And I really like the way that it looks, right? Now, the only complaint I have, and this is yarn choice on my part, I always choose cotton typically for his shawls because I like the stitch definition. And he usually does really cool and unique stitch techniques that I've never done before that I really want to stand out and be able to see. And I'm telling you, cotton stitch definition, holy smokes, best thing ever. So I used 100% cotton on this. Terrapin Fiberworks. You guys go check that shop out. Incredible. And as a result of having, I think clue 4 doesn't necessarily need stitch definition. It needs volume. It needs to be able to grab onto the stitches. Stitches need to hold hands and hug, right? They don't need to be separated from each other. And I think in this case, because it is cotton, you will see when you get close up, like, I don't know if this is reading on camera or not. I can't really tell. But there's a lot of light that's coming through the pattern because it's cotton, and cotton stays defined. I think, just something to think about, synthetic fiber acrylic might be a really good choice for this project. Okay. I also think if you wanted a big schlanket, friggin' do acrylic and DK weight. It would be phenomenal to have on the couch. Phenomenal. And I actually think I may do that, and I may do a black and white version of this. I don't know. I'm going to think about it. But that's my only hiccup there. Now, so do the gauge swatch. The other thing he recommends, weigh your yarn. And when I went into clue 4, oh shit, I just dropped it on the floor. When I went into clue 4, you guys, I had 30 grams of A, 32 of B, 40 of C, and 44 of D. And that's because I used more of we already went through that, you already know. So when I did the recommended pattern, where he's like, this is the recommended pattern, weigh your yarn, see where you're at to see if you can do extra rows, I couldn't. Because I only had 8 grams of A, 21 of B. No, I'm sorry. 8 of A, 13 of B, 21 of C, and 25 of D. If that gives you an idea. And then I knew, I was like, well, shit, if I do additional rows, I'm not going to have enough for fringe. So keep that in mind, that if you want to do a wider border than the repeat, You want it to be like, and I wish I had had enough yarn to do a wider border in retrospect. If you do a wider border, I don't know if you would be able to do fringe as closely spaced as I did. Like I did it on in between every triangle. Maybe you could do every 3, but just keep in mind yarn management is going to be super important towards the end of the project. Do not start knitting additional rows on the end if you don't know how much yarn you have left, because you can't really walk that back without it being a problem, because there's only certain rows you can stop at where it looks good. But you do you know what I'm saying? I'm just warning you. So yeah, that was clue 4. I think when I look at clue 3 and clue 4, and my sister and I were talking about this a little bit, I don't remember the painter's name, and I think she said she thinks it might be Chagall, but I don't. She's always usually right, so we'll just say it is. But do you remember in Ferris Bueller the scene where they're at the museum, and it's the painting of the picnic on the river, and I can't remember, it's probably, I don't know what the name of the painting is, but there's like a little boy who's all alone in the painting, and it makes, I cry every time I see that scene. I don't know what it is about that painting, but anyway, it's a great example of something that from afar it's so beautiful, but when you get up close, it's a hot mess. And meaning that, not that the painting's a hot mess close up, but it's just the pixelation of the dots, right, of paint that when you pull back are so fucking phenomenal. That is kind of how I feel about clue 3 and clue 4. Because when I am looking at them close up, I'm not in love. It's kind of a hot mess. But when I walk backwards, or if I get space from it, like if I get a distance from it, I'm like, oh, that's pretty fucking cohesive. So that's how I feel about that. But it is an interesting thing, and I don't know if that was intended or if that's just what I'm taking away from it. So really, the only technical knitting where I had to learn a new technique, like ground up and gauged it, was clue 4. But it was easy and it was fun, not intimidating at all. So overall, in terms of easiness, in terms of clarity, all of that, it's an A+. Like if you are new to West Knits, or if you're new to MKALs and you've looked at the past MKALs and you've been like, oh, there's no way, you 100% can do this. This is the easiest one that I've done by far. And by easy, I just mean it wasn't taking up a lot of headspace while I was knitting. It wasn't overly complicated where I was tinking and frogging all the time. There's usually a section I have to wipe out every time. And there really wasn't anything crazy on this. I didn't have a major tink or a frog. So yeah, I think in terms of an intro knit to West Knits world, 100% this would be it. I think for me, and this is why I think I was having difficulty filming. I want to give like my overview of the project of the MKAL and my expectations. I shouldn't say always, but I guess for me, the West Knits MKAL always has hurdles in it, but I always learn something. I'm usually crying at something. Like I've usually called my sister with like a bright red face because I fucked something up. There was none of that. And I think I like that challenge. I think when I, in my mind's eye, when I think about a West Knits pattern, there's always a risk in there, right? There's always something that you're like, oh, yarn shrimp, don't know about that. Whether you like it or not, that risk is there, right? And this project just didn't have that. It wasn't there. And I don't know how to say this. If you sat me down and said, okay, here's 5 various pattern writers, and Stephen West was one of them, whoever, it doesn't matter who the other four are. And then you were like, match the shawl to the designer. I think this shawl, I would never have picked him first. And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that. I'm just saying this is the most vanilla feeling pattern that I've knit by him. And it doesn't mean there aren't others that are, and I don't want that to sound negative. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just not what I expected. And I guess I've grown accustomed to heavy, heavy knitting in the MKALs to the point where I'm like, I'll get this done when I'm 90, right? And I'm also really conditioned to be ready for some bizarre technique that is crazy, but in the end will somehow make sense to me. And that just didn't happen. Like that risk taking, or I don't know, something was missing for me. And it's hard for me to say that because it's a beautiful wearable shawl in the end. I wore it today. But it's just not what I've come to expect. And maybe that's the point. Maybe I should stop expecting things, right? Like, who am I? But yeah. I don't know if that makes sense at all. So if you've never knit a West Knits project before, this is a great one. It's beautiful. But it's also unusual in comparison to some of the past MKALs. So keep that in mind. If you want more of a challenge, I think to date, the one that probably challenged me the most was Slipstravaganza, just for the sheer enormity of it. And I'll have Steve put Daphne up so you can see it. But this just didn't do that. Now, it is wonderful. He was inspired by 70s wallpaper. He nailed it. But it's very palette specific. So if you pick colors that are not indicative of the 70s, it does read differently. And I'll have Steve put up Catherine's, my sister's shawl. And she did a very beautiful kind of like sea glass color spectrum. It's gorgeous, but it isn't 70s to me. So I think that your color palette really will dictate if it really grabs that feel. And I think my palette was so straight up 70s that there was no way it wouldn't nail it. So I do think it was successful in terms of what he was doing. But the choices that were made were just not choices that I would have pegged him to make. Especially when you look at some of the wallpapers that he put up. I don't know. Weigh in on that. Like, let me know what you think about that. And I may be completely wrong, but I just feel like there weren't risks taken in this pattern that he has taken in the past. But again, there's only so many stitches in the universe that you can put in a shawl. So like, at what point does that peter off? And yeah, I don't know. I hope that we get back, well, I don't want to say back to risk taking, but I'm curious to see, like, I know the hybrid knitting is coming out and I haven't looked at that, but I am kind of curious to see what direction he's going in. He seems to be, I don't want to say calming down because that's just not the right phrase, but he seems to be, I don't know what it is. Someone else tell me, because I don't know. And am I alone in that feeling? Let me know that. Anyway, it's a wrap, you guys. That's the wrap. Now, you know I name my projects, right? So we're going to go on a journey and we're going to talk about something here. And then I'm going to give you her name. Now, when I was growing up, my dad's dad lived in a kind of like a nursing home community type of thing. And this is like in the late 70s, early 80s. It may not have even been the 80s. I cannot remember how old I was when my grandfather passed away. But I was in elementary school. So it would have been either late 70s or very early 80s. Anyway, he was in this place called Attic Angels. And it was like a high-rise building. And I don't know how many times I got to visit him there. It was not very many. The one time I remember distinctly, I went down, and I don't know why. Like, I can't remember the circumstances of this, but there was a woman who lived like 3 floors down from my grandfather. And for some reason, I was going down to meet her, but I was by myself, I think. I don't think I had anybody with me. If Catherine, if you were there, will you let me know? Because I don't remember who was there, but for some reason, I truly think I was by myself. Not like traveling to grandpa's. Like, I think there were more people, but I think I went to this woman's apartment by myself. And she opens the door, and literally, like, I gravitate. Listen, we know I'm a little left of center. So, like, I gravitate to some weird shit sometimes. But, like, Harold and Maude, like, okay, story of that. That should tell you everything you need to know. And I know that's controversial for several reasons, but I don't really care. She opened the door, and there were oriental rugs hanging and tapestries, like, all over the place. Like, I don't remember seeing a window. It was really kind of like dim lit. All the lamps had covers on them, like lace work and shit. Like, this would have been hanging on top of a lamp, like this shawl. There were brass things everywhere, beaded things. I mean, like, it was a maximalist dream walking in this place. And I just remember, like, as a kid, like, looking around and just, it was amazing. Like, it was amazing. And it's probably who I'll be as I get older a little bit. That's probably why I gravitated to it. And I can't really remember what she was wearing. It was like a long, not a muumuu, but it was like a one-piece, like, floor length, really rich jewel toned color. And she had violet, this beautiful purple lipstick on. But she had very thin and, like, very wrinkled lips, but this beautiful lipstick. And you could just tell she had just lived this incredible life. And as an adult, I wish I knew more about her. Like, I wish I knew more about her. And I wish I had known as a little kid to, like, ask questions, but I was just so fucking floored and amazed. And anyway, I don't want you to tell her. I'll tell you her name in a minute. We go home, and I'm not I'm trying to remember how old I was when he passed, but I was in elementary school. So it was either late 70s, early 80s. And it's the only time I've seen my father cry ever, when he got that phone call, and it scared me. But my grandfather died. They found him in his reading chair. He was dressed for his date with her. He had put on his suit. I think it was probably his moss green suit. And he had his newspaper. He was reading his newspaper, and he passed away. I don't know if it was a heart attack or if it was a brain event, but it was painless, and he was ready to go on his date. Her name was Dolores. Why is this affecting me now? Oh my God. Anyway, we can all hope that we're getting ready for a date with our Dolores, and we're ready to go. I'm really excited, but we got ready early, so we had time to read the paper. And then we just go, right? Like, that's a good way to go. That's a good life. And so this is Dolores. And the weird thing about it is, I would think Dolores should have been, like, really colorful, but for some reason this is Dolores to me, and I don't know why. And maybe it's because my memories are from the 70s when I think about Dolores, even though it was all jewel toned and, like, craziness. That's what was going on everywhere else, this kind of palette, right? I don't know. It's weird when you remember things like that. So Dolores imprinted on me at such a young age. And I'll laugh really hard if her name wasn't Dolores, but that's what I remember. Yeah. So, in homage to Dolores, may we all grow old like that, with stories to tell. And I don't know. So I would like to say thank you to Stephen West because that brought up a lot of good memories for me. And I also would like to say thank you to each and every one of you who followed along. I didn't really show you my knitting process during this MKAL series, and I've done that in the past, and I don't know why. We'll find out what I do next year for the MKAL because you know I'm going to do it again. I say I'm not going to, and I do it every year. We'll see what happens. But I hope you knit it. It's worth it, you guys. It is worth it. If you are an avid West Knits knitter, you probably are sitting where I'm sitting with it, where you'll wear it, but it's like, okay. But do it for the love of knitting. For the love of Dolores. I can't believe I teared up, you guys. What's wrong with me? I haven't even had that much beer. Okay, listen. That's it. If this is your first time like with Sheepless Needles, come on over to my regular podcast. Maybe once to twice a month I'll be posting videos. It'll be some knitting, it'll be some gaming, it'll be some books. It's a like cornucopia of bullshit. And it's fun. We have fun. I try to have fun. That's it. It's a wrap, people. Thanks for hanging out. Thanks for tuning in. Keep knitting. Don't let it get you down. I love you guys. I'll see you soon. Toodles!
Oki 80 PCM at 16 kilohertz sampling frequency. This is Oki 80 PCM at 16 kilohertz sampling frequency. This is Oki 80 PCM at 16 kilohertz sampling